iOS, you can't like join those tables together or select across schemas because it would bridge locations. So it's a nice improvement. And this is a nice one too. If you've ever written macros and you find yourself setting variables, you have to do this bad hack where you effectively use a set statement to do some operation that doesn't actually return any data. There's a new do block, which I'm happy to chat about if you have questions, but this will just clean up a lot of macro code, I think. There's a really neat new dbt debug command whose output we can find in the pull request. Actually, maybe not. Well, we can't find it. This shows a bunch of information. I can show you the sample output. It effectively shows you like if your profile set up in your project and which target you're using, if all the dependencies are installed, which database you're connecting to, all this stuff. And so if you're doing kind of complex stuff on the command line, you're setting a custom profile, overriding the target, etc. You can run dbt debug with these same flags and find out if everything's configured as you expect and make sure you're connecting to the right database, the right schemas, all that.
I think I'm just going to make a point on this one. Like for the guys who have joined this call, this may not be super helpful at first, but like I myself, I remember when I started using dbt, I think like I had multiple things that were wrong with my project in that like, I think I was like, my VPN wasn't white, or my IP address wasn't whitelisted, and I had like the wrong profile and like all these things. And this would have actually helped figure out like be able to isolate what the things that I was doing wrong were. And I think when you guys have new people joining your teams and just making sure they've set their profile up correctly, like the number of times I've got that wrong, it's just going to make it so much easier that they've got the connection test, and just makes it easier to isolate when things aren't, like why things haven't been able to run, as opposed to just getting like generic kind of, database error. So yeah, I like it a lot.
Yeah, it's a good one. We're going to start asking you for this if you ever have support questions. It'll show your Python version and dbt version as well. So it'll save me asking you for 8 different things, I think. Cool. Some other stuff, some of these aren't so important, but if you have any questions about them, I'm very happy to talk about them. One cool kind of broad stroke to talk about is these 2 issues. We understand that if dbt takes too long to run things, people aren't going to use dbt as much as with any product. And so we're acutely interested in making dbt as fast in an interactive sense as possible. So the time from typing dbt run to dbt actually like running things for you should be minimized, as well as like kind of macro levels. Like if we can make projects 30% faster, that's a great thing to do. So to that end, we've made one performance improvement. We've also added profiling. And so we can understand the performance impact of different features that we add or bugs that we fix, things like that, which will help us on this mission going forwards. Lots of fixes here. Some of these were gnarly and stuck around for a long time. We finally tracked them down. But by and large, you shouldn't notice most of these. Again, if you have questions, happy to discuss. That's kind of the big overview. There's one other thing that I want to broach because it's come up, but we haven't actually talked about it too much externally. And that is the dbt hub site. So I can see some of your faces. If you've seen this before, can you like nod your head or thumbs up or something? This might be new. No? Okay. So dbt supports packages. It has a package manager, and it lets you do things like import the dbt utils package into your own project. And so there are helpful macros in here for doing some common SQL operations, or as I think Klaus said in Slack, doing a date spine. There are custom schema tests that you can import, things like that. So one of the problems that arises when you specify these dependencies is you might, through your various dependencies, require the same package in multiple places with different versions. And so we do a certain amount of like version resolution here using this hub site. And so I can show you, there's an alternative way of specifying packages in dbt. This tells dbt to use this hub site, and it says, in this case, this is a package spec, use specifically version 0.1.21. You could equivalently say, use any version greater than 0.1.15 or something like that. And if you have another dependency that says use any version less than 0.1.20, dbt can resolve that to a particular version. So as we continue to invest in packages, this is going to be a really useful and necessary part of how they work. We're still kind of testing this out internally, but it's actually live at the moment, and we're using it for our projects. So keep an eye out for some more information coming on this front. We actually finally got this working in the last release, which is why I'm telling you about it now. And Claire, I think that's the overview of O12.2.
Yeah, I think just on Hub, there was like a Slack conversation recently where a few people on the Slack were talking about building a package for HubSpot. And that's something that like is super exciting to me, that like HubSpot is not something that I've ever had to use, like that data set I've ever had to use. I have no knowledge of it, but there are multiple people in the community who seem to know what it was and like what kind of modeling they wanted to do with it. And that's something that we would love to see a whole lot more of into the future. And I think like the Hub site, I think at the moment are all of the packages ones that we've built. Is that correct? Yeah. So like having this sort of gives us a platform so that when people do build packages in the community, we can share those more widely, which is like a super exciting thing for us as a group, I think. Yeah, that's all I had to say, or all we have as the strict agenda. So like the point of office hours really is just that, like, to get people who have something they want to talk about, or like a problem that they're working on at the moment. Like we have so many smart minds in this community, and it's cool to try and bring a few of us together at a time to like basically jam on anything that anyone wants to talk about, really. So I don't know if anyone has something that they want to like start off with, like a modeling problem they have, or like a question they have about DBT, or like a problem that they're basically trying to solve. Does anyone really, like, feel free to just sort of unmute yourself and jump in. Otherwise I have a
question on Hub just specifically. So if I'm building a package that uses DBT utils, what's the recommendation there? Is it just to point to the Hub now?
I would continue to use the Git specifier for like the very near future. We don't have any more code to change, I don't think. Like, I don't anticipate making more changes here, but this is sort of like when you use a Git dependency, you're relying on GitHub to be running. Whereas if you're using a Hub dependency, you're relying on hub.getdbt.com to be running. And the way we've orchestrated this, I'm very confident that we'll have like fantastic uptime numbers, but I also want to test this in production for ourselves for a while before I feel comfortable telling you that you should use it as well. So I don't need, sorry, go ahead.
Do you recommend it all including other packages, or just rely on downstream users to include both packages? So if I have something that uses DBT utils, should I even be referencing that in my package, or should I just make sure that the downstream folks include both?
Yeah, it's a great question. So DBT won't try to do any version resolution if you're using Git packages. And so I think if you can say to your downstream users, you have to include DBT utils like greater than some version, you're sort of implementing a version of version resolution, but it's very manual. I think that's probably preferred, if you can get away with that, to specifying a Git version yourself. Because then every package has to use exactly that same DBT utils version. So if you say it's 0115, everyone has to use 0115, or like it doesn't work. The package site will resolve that problem. Yeah.
Versus pinning it in my package.
Yeah, that's right. You can set a range of versions with the Hub site. So you can say greater than 0.1, less than 0.2. And as long as all the other packages that reference DBT utils are in that version range, DBT can pick a version that will satisfy all dependencies. So that's like why we built this.
Just out of interest, will it by default pick the highest version?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Highest satisfiable version. And if they're incompatible, it'll tell you like these packages need this range, but this one needs that range, and DBT can't figure out what to do.
How do you get things on DBT Hub?
Yeah, right. So I think at some point Connor's going to do a write-up about how we built all of this. It's modeled after existing package hubs like PyPy and NPM, and like what they've learned and what they did wrong. And so the whole site is static. There are no moving parts. It's like a static site generated, actually using Netlify, if you're familiar. And so what that means is it's kind of manual. We have to like push new code to a repository at present. to incorporate a new package onto the site. It also means that if the site is running, like it's not just going to go down, like a server can't fail. It's on a CDN, it's like distributed. So there's a lot of great uptime characteristics of that, but it also means that it's somewhat manual to add new projects right now. I think long-term, we'd love some sort of admin interface where you can upload your own packages, change descriptions, things like that. But we're not quite there yet.
Thank you.
So you can ask me, I suppose, is the answer.
Right. Okay. As usual.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brian, not sure if it's too loud out here. Couldn't find a room open, but I guess my question is there a good way to add tests for incremental loads? Because basically I have my testing on a clone in Snowflake, and there's no like streaming data coming in. And so I'm trying to figure out a good way to test incremental load scripts before actually putting it into production.
Drew, I'm gonna let you take this one.
Yeah, surely. So I guess, what are you trying to test, Brian?
I mean, I just want to make sure that the way I'm setting up the incremental load is working how it should work. It's not like skipping any records, it's doing the correct whatever. And like it's still following all the test cases that I have.
Yeah. Yeah, so I guess one option is to kind of do this manually, in which you do a DBT run, you wait a while, you do another DBT run, the DBT test. That doesn't sound ideal. I think that, I mean, it would certainly work, and that's kind of how I do it. What might also work is using a sort of staging environment if it's a big enough problem for you to invest in this. So, for instance, with we make Center, which is becoming DBT Cloud, and in DBT Cloud, there's a notion of environments, and so it's typical to have a production environment and like a CI type environment that runs pull requests. And I can also imagine a staging environment where you can pull a particular branch from your Git provider, and then you can schedule that to run if you're like testing new things out, and you can have the run steps be like do a run and do a test, and you can let that run for a day or two if you need to, or a couple hours, whatever it is. And then you can still kind of like run this on a schedule and not need to manually kick it off, but it won't impact your production builds. You can set it to run in a custom schema, for instance, with a clone of your database. Does that make sense? I can show you maybe what that looks like.
Do you mind? Because I still don't see how that would replicate like actual streaming rows coming in, or like because the clone doesn't change. And
oh,
like,
the clone doesn't change. We're using the clone.
We'd have to rebuild the clone, and so there's no actual.
Yeah. So what? You're cloning the source database.
I'm using Snowflake zero-copy cloning, and so it just creates a direct clone from the metadata that you can do whatever on, but it doesn't. But like my ETL isn't connected to the clone; it's connected to the actual.
I guess I'm confused. Like, the database that you clone? How about this? Are you using different databases for your DBT models and your source data, or are they in the same databases?
So I'm using it's in the same database.
Okay, so why bother cloning?
Sorry, I mean I clone the main database, and I use that as development environment to test the DBT strips, and then push into production into the main.
Sure. I guess, so my question is, like, when you do the clone, is that so that you can use the sort of like built up incremental state of your DBT project? Is that the idea? Like, you don't have to rebuild historically?
Yeah, I mean, and it's just really easy with Snowflake. It takes like 10 seconds, and it's a full copy of all your data. It doesn't take up any more storage space.
Right.
And so there's no reason not to use like a full copy, especially because my model will run within a few minutes. So it doesn't really take any extra time. I mean, I guess.
So
like
I think my recommendation then is. I'm
sorry. Yeah, I think like what would be really cool is if there's a way for, I guess, like DBT to do a replay of certain data, and then you can kind of test it out. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly that would look like. I kind of see it in my head.
Yeah. I would just point to the raw data. I wouldn't. Oh yeah, wait, hold on. Emilie's, I think, done a lot of this. The zero copy clones. You can test on a copy of your production environment as opposed to in a dev environment. Okay, so I haven't used zero copy clones before, so maybe I don't have the full picture, but I imagine that this problem goes away if you point your DBT models to the source data itself that's being continually updated by your data loader. I don't know what the benefit is of cloning the source data as like a snapshot in time. You can just point to that live, hey Brian, you can just point to that live, like data destination, like where whatever ETL tool you're using is dumping the data periodically. Like if you always point to that, you'll always get fresh data, whether in development or production. It shouldn't matter, especially on Snowflake where there's no like resource contention around data access. What will make sense, I imagine, to zero copy clone is your DBT models. And so what you could do is put those in their own database, or even clone the whole thing, but just always point back to the source database for these transformations. Emilie, maybe if you're able to, like, if you have insight here, I'd love to hear it as well.
I mean, I see exactly what you're saying. And now that I think about it, I think I kind of create the dev environment just because that's how I'm used to doing things, just in a programmatic way.
Yeah.
I still don't see how, like, even if I point to the live database, just because the models will run once, there's no actual testing of the incremental feature.
Sure. So,
you can refresh the clone. So, when you want to think of the clone as like a snapshot in time, essentially, that you're building on top of when you do dbt run, you're right that like there's no new data. But if you refresh the clone, then what happens is you get all that new data, and your next dbt run will update your prod models, your cloned prod models. So you're not actually touching prod, you're on a branch. At least that's how we have it configured. And Thomas Lapiana can tell you more about how we have that configured. I can also point you to our CI jobs. But that way, like, you are actually testing incremental builds and what that new data looks like. And so part of our CI process involves taking that clone and then a dbt run full refresh, a dbt test, a dbt run to test all our incremental models, and then another dbt test. And things only get merged into prod if they pass through all of them.
Got it. Is that like through a CI tool like GitLab, or are you doing that all within dbt? I'm just getting through another tool. I don't see how that would be done.
Our CI process is using GitLab CI, yeah.
So yeah, we don't have like a CI tool like that set up, and I was hoping to not have to, and just kind of stay within Center and dbt Cloud. But if that's the only way, yeah, I get what you're saying.
Cool, Brian. I'm happy to show you how we do some of this, maybe separately. There are certainly ways, like with any orchestration tool, you do this. I hear like nothing but good things about GitLab CI. I think that's a great route too. But I think there's a path to doing it in dbt Cloud. Cool.
So I actually is Teo on? I don't know if that's if you Teo is Teo or not. I'm like looking at his square, but nothing's there.
No, I'm brand new here actually.
Oh, you're not the Teo that I was looking for. Damn.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, well, that's right. So I was actually I kind of wanted to show off a project that I worked on at my last job, which I hopefully is like not too strange to show. Where did I? Here we go. Oh, wrong screen. Hopefully I don't have anything too crazy in there. Cool. Can you see this Medium article? Yes? Yeah. Okay. So I only joined Fishtown a couple months ago, and before I left, I worked on this huge project at Airtasker where we revamped every single event that went into our user behavior analytics. And it was crazy. We had 180 custom events, some of which were across all three platforms: web, iOS, Android, some of which were specific to certain platforms. And prior to that, we had a headache. our event data was so terrible that like it was just almost unusable. It was like if someone signed up on one platform, it would be called like signed up, and the other one would be called like user sign up, and the other one would be called sign up user, and it was just like a total mess. And so we did this project to clean up everything, and like, and this is like kind of separate to DBT and all that, but it's like it's work that's relevant to I think everyone in this Slack. And today, actually, I had no idea this was going out. So today, yesterday, kind of Australian time, but yesterday our time. This article went up by my data lead that talked about this project that we did, which was where we decided to version control every single event for all of our 180 events across our platform. So originally when we started this project, we had a Google Sheet, which was like already a whole lot better than what we had. And by the end of this project, we had YAML files because everyone loves YAML. So we love YAML. This is like an example of one of our definitions, which basically like defined a particular event that then like, so like that was what the event was called. And based on this, we actually, this part happened after I left, but our engineers actually built code gen tools on top of this YAML file that like generated the code they needed to fire these specific events from their different apps, like different platforms, which I think is freaking cool. But the really cool thing about this for me was like, from an organizational perspective, this project absolutely got buy-in from like every single part of our company. We had developers who just saw like analytics as a second class thing that they had to do. They were like, oh, I'd have to like put tracking in my thing, and they were like super not keen on it. And then when we came out with this this YAML file, and like similarly, like product managers didn't know how to communicate these events to their developers. And we built this whole workflow around like when a feature was being designed, it could not leave the design process until the definitions had been spec'd out, and the PRs had to like go via the developers and like make sure that they made sense. And because it was like a Git flow, our developers became super comfortable with being like, hey, this description, it doesn't actually make sense on my platform. Like this thing doesn't happen this way. Because sometimes like we had a sprawling app that had all these like crazy workflows to it. So sometimes we just didn't know how things worked. And so like people, like our developers would reply and be like, this is actually what I think you mean. And like, this is what I would do instead. And we trained our product managers in like GitHub as well, because we were using GitHub, and they got confident enough to be able to like write definitions in the web editor. And the thing that I was most proud of was this was like my first Python project that I built from scratch. And so every single time a new definition was added, like the definition would get validated. So it was like, is this definition a valid definition? You know, like is this category one of the categories that we've allowed? Is this a Boolean? Is the description, like all these different things that it was testing. And every single time a pull request was made, our Circle CI tests would run. And then right at the end, there were like a lot of emojis if you got it right. That was like the little okay woman and like the ta-da, because like product managers and myself love emojis. And yeah, so that was sort of where when I left the organization, that was where we're at. And we'd written 180 of the events, and I think about 40 of them have been implemented. And from what I've heard now, they've got code generation happening on top of it, and they want to like build this project as like an entire like service in itself kind of thing. Like this is like the API that it hits, rather than it being a code gen and then copying the code in. They want to be able to like import the file and things like that. And I kind of wanted to share this because I think this is like a problem that a lot of us have in terms of like we're working downstream of where our data is like we're working with the data that's already being generated. And I think this is a really cool example of how we went upstream and we were like, no, we're cleaning it at the source, and we got really, really good buy-in and had a really good result. I'm super keen to talk to anyone that's interested about this project. I'm really excited that a Medium article got written about it, because I had no idea that it was going to be written, and I was really worried that like this would never see the light of day. But yeah, if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to jump in, or feel free to ask me a question on Slack afterwards as well. So yeah, my update. Cool. Anyone else got anything they want to like share or jam on or anything like that?
I'm happy to jump in. So I pinged Claire about this earlier this week, but my team at GitLab made what I have named generate DBT schema YAML script. And what it does is it introspects your analytics schema and pulls all the table names, and then it generates one massive schema.yml file that's just a skeleton. So model colon, the name of the model, columns colon, whatever, and then each of the column names, and then you can fill in the descriptions. It doesn't assume you're adding any tests or anything. It's not smart. It's just like putting out the template, you copy and paste it wherever you want it to go. If it's okay, I'd like to post the link here, and then I'll post the issue link, and anyone who has any requests, or like if you want to take a look at it and add to it, or if you want to say like, here's a way to make it better, you can either comment on the issue, or if you don't have a GitLab account, ping me and I'll add it to the issue and give you full credit for it. So.
Oh, that's awesome. I can't wait to see the link to it.
Yeah, I was pretty excited when I saw it, but I was also had a lot of work that day, so I haven't looked at it in fine detail. But yeah, I'm pretty excited to see this. This is an outstanding issue on DBT, and like I think there's definitely room for tools like this. And I think people were talking today about bash completion and a few other things where it's like this doesn't necessarily have to be solved by DBT like core. It can be like a tool that someone builds. I think ages ago, Brian Abelson built a base model generator. And he's going to write a discourse post about it at some point.
Yeah, that's on my to-do list. Yeah, I'd really like to just make it like maybe like a separate command line tool or something like that. I'm curious to see the work on plugins, because one of the problems was that it seemed I kind of wrote it so that it would only work for Redshift, but it would be cool if it would work for sort of any database, so you could just like generate the base models regardless of what your warehouse is. But yeah, long to-do list.
I think we all have very long to-do lists. Yeah, actually on that point of like getting it to be cross-database, we were talking earlier about a few people have been chatting about making a HubSpot package, and I think cross-database modeling is something that like we as a consulting firm have had to think about in a way that like most companies haven't had to think about. So I think that's somewhere where like we can definitely help, because we've had to solve this problem before. So yeah, maybe at some point we'll like, if I find that there's a few threads on like how do you make this compatible with multiple databases, we'll try and package it up and do a discourse post or something like that. Cool. Yeah.
I have to take off, everyone. It's nice seeing you.
Thank you, Brian. I'll see you next week. I'm heading up to New York next week, so get to meet some people in person, which I'm very excited about.
Hey, so I'm pretty new to DBT, and I've actually been trying to introduce it to my team. It's like a couple other business intelligence people and a data engineer. And this is a very general question, but I was wondering if you guys had any suggestions on like the right approach for kind of selling the tool to your team, and like how would you like, what's the best practice for like going about doing like the first steps? Like we have Redshift and Looker right now as the main stack, and like it's kind of crazy, but we have like these insane queries in Looker, like the derived tables in Looker. Like some of them are like 400 or 500 lines of SQL, and we're like kind of repeating code everywhere. So I feel like there's a huge opportunity, but I want to make sure people don't get scared, because it would be a lot of work to kind of refactor everything. And I was just wondering if you had any tips for like approaching this conversation with the team.
I'm gonna jump in here, John. Just quickly, where do you work and where are you based? Like,
I work at this company called Cover Wallet in New York City.
okay, cool. Well, I'm in New York regularly, so maybe I'll come say hey one day.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a problem that I think about a lot because part of my role as community manager is to get as many people using DBT as possible. I think two things on that. So the first one is you're in a really good spot if you're going from like Looker to DBT. It actually makes like life a whole lot easier compared to like starting something from scratch. And a member of our community, Dylan Baker, who you might have seen on like just floating around, he's on London time, so not always crossing over. He is, I hope I'm not going to kind of steal his thunder too much, but he's writing a pretty cool blog post literally on this exact topic at the moment. So I would recommend sending him a message and seeing if you can get an advanced copy of that. And it kind of talks about like when are the reasons that you should move over from Looker, which I think can help you. It also it does say like what can Looker PDTs do that DBT can't, because there's like one or two tiny things that it can do that we can't. And I think that article in itself will just help you kind of build your like case for your company. Of like, you know, it's like your business case, like is how you're going to sell it to your company because someone else has already thought about all the pros and cons. So I would recommend sending him a message and just say that Claire like told you to send a message. The other thing is just in terms of like, how do you kind of build a project from scratch, or even like one of the, I guess, an adjacent problem that I've tried to solve before is like, how do you get people like getting a feel for DBT when like all of our data sets are so unique to our own businesses, and you know it's like having a sort of hello world is quite difficult. So we do have like, I've built a demo project before which has like some CSVs of products, orders, customers in there and a few models on top of that, and I'll just very quickly find the link for that and put it in the chat. And that is something, sorry, I can't multitask. I'm just putting in the chat now. That is a way that like, I guess you can get started with a project that is like fully self-contained just to get a feel of like what DBT is. And also get your users to have a feel for it. I gave a talk in Sydney, which is recorded somewhere, which like basically was a demo of DBT. I can send that through. But the other thing is like, the next thing on my Trello board for DBT community is to like redo our tutorials with the demo project. So I think we're going to be building out a better demo. So that I think is a good way to get started with a feel for like DBT. And then, but sort of closer to your original question of like, how do you get started with a DBT project for yourself? Like, how do you start like that transition yourself? That's actually part 2 of Dylan's blog. He's written part 1, which is why you should transfer over, and part 2 he's writing at the moment. Like he's written it and he hasn't released it yet. Part 2 is how you should transfer over, and I think he has maybe more opinions on that than I do. So yeah, I'll let him, when if you can reach out to him, then he might do the best chance to answer that question. But yeah, if anyone else wants to jump in.
Yeah, thanks. I'll definitely send him a message. Sounds like he's writing that article.
Yeah.
The perfect time for us.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And
hey, John, I'm just curious. What's the impetus for moving off of PDTs for you folks? Is it a performance thing or a complexity thing or something else?
So yeah, I can give you some more background. I joined about 3 months ago, and like I was, trying to get on board and get up to speed, and there's just a ton of complexity in kind of like hidden in Looker with all these queries, and there was no documentation. Kind of everything was in the other 2 analysts' heads basically. So I was just kind of like going to them to figure out what was going on. There's also a lot of logic that's repeated like all over the place. So I forget exactly how I found out about DBT, but I played around with it a little bit in our warehouse and was trying to kind of get like a simple proof of concept working. And the documentation feature, which I know somewhere recently it seemed like a huge benefit just for me, because like I still have no idea what's going on in a lot of the tables, and the kind of having a one reference point instead of having all this logic repeated all over the place in Looker was also a big advantage. So I'm trying to kind of crystallize those ideas and sell them to the rest of the team. But yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Cool. Yeah, those are great reasons to use DBT. I will second Claire's suggestion to ping Dylan. I saw the preview of the first draft. But separately, there are some other posts, I think, specifically about like docs. I know we have one, we talk about like scaling knowledge. And so for you individually as like a consumer, it's like, how is this thing supposed to work? That's compelling. But also as a producer, you get to like be in control of spreading the knowledge to the rest of your team. So I can share that with you for sure. And what else? The other thing, I don't know if you've seen this, DBT has like testing functionality built in too. So you can assert constraints about your data. And so it's one thing to write down like this column is unique, but it's another thing to assert every time DBT runs that like that's still unique. Because I know a lot of times in PDTs, if you're not careful, like you can really blow up a table with some bad joins. So yeah, certainly. I mean, I think it's a great idea to migrate, but also I understand that like it's a big endeavor. So maybe I can in a moment share some links that might be helpful for you and your team.
Yeah, that would be great. Really
I have one more thing to add to this, which is like not going to be immediately useful, but if you're still in this problem in March, just a few months away, but that's kind of the pace of how sometimes things change. In March, there is a Looker meetup happening in New York. Well, it's hopefully happening. It's kind of like in draft stage at the moment, which is going to be talking about Looker PDTs versus DBT models. So, that's as close to your question as possible, but it is a few months away. I think Drew and I would definitely be at that one. And yeah, so I'll share information about that when we have it.
Great. Yeah, hopefully we can get started before then, but yeah, I'm sure that'll be helpful regardless.
Well, hopefully you can come along and support our team.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for the help, really appreciate it.
All good. Is that it? Anyone else want to jump on and jam about something? No? Okay, cool. I'm going to close office hours then. Thank you very much, guys. We might change the time of this next week because some of our London colleagues have asked me to move it earlier. It's just Dylan. Dylan's just asked me to move earlier. But yeah, I'll keep you guys posted. Please send me your feedback on whether you found this useful. We're probably just going to keep it going for a while because we think there may just be a case of like, you've got to keep it in the diary and people will get used to it. So yeah, if you have any feedback, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll hopefully see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.